Imagine saving up all year for a vacation.
Right.
You've booked the flights, you mapped out the itinerary, and you're just incredibly excited. But when you finally get there, you find out the destination doesn't actually want you.
Which is a terrible feeling.
Yeah, and it's not because you don't have enough money either. It's because you aren't considered, like, morally evolved enough to visit. So welcome to the deep dive.
It honestly sounds like a dystopian sci-fi plot, but it's actually the cutting edge of global travel policy right now.
Yeah, it really is. Because for decades, the tourism industry basically trained us to be consumers, right?
Exactly. The world was just a product, and we bought a ticket to consume it.
Right. But the rules of the game are shifting really fast. So today, we're unpacking the noble but incredibly messy world of regenerative tourism.
And we're pulling from a really fascinating piece of research.
We are. It was published in May 2026 in the Journal of Sustainable Tourism. The paper is by McKeeman, Hayes, and Tucker. And they took a hard look at how the drive to attract the ideal eco-conscious traveler is accidentally creating an exclusive elitist club.
Right, and in the process, destinations are shutting out the exact people who most need the opportunity to learn how to travel better.
Exactly.
And, this isn't just some abstract academic theory. This is a blueprint for how you will be judged, graded, and welcomed or rejected by destinations in the near future.
So before we get into who gets kicked out of the club, we probably need to understand the club itself. Like, what is a destination actually trying to achieve when they declare themselves regenerative?
That's the big question.
Because it sounds like a massive leap from the consumer-led tourism we're all used to.
Yeah.
Where the customer is always right and the local town just bends over backward to give you the experience you paid for.
Oh, it's a total paradigm shift. I mean, regenerative tourism moves completely away from that consumer mindset.
Yeah.
It tries to build community-led and place-based tourism instead. The underlying philosophy here is called living systems thinking.
Living systems thinking. Okay, let's unpack that.
Sure. At its core, this is the recognition that humans aren't separate from nature and we aren't separate from each other.
Right.
So you have to think of a destination not as a backdrop for your Instagram photos, but as a complex living organism.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, where the ecology, the local culture, and the economy are all locked in this symbiotic relationship.
Okay, let's bring that down to earth for a second. What does living systems thinking actually look like when I'm, say, walking around a coastal tourist town?
Well, it means every interaction is weighed by its impact on the whole. So in consumer tourism, a hotel might import all its food and just pipe its wastewater right into the ocean because it's cheap.
Right, prioritizing the tourist budget over everything.
Exactly. But under a regenerative model, that hotel has to be integrated into the community. They're sourcing from local farmers, recycling water, and making sure the profits stay in the neighborhood.
Got it.
So the fundamental question shifts from what does the tourist want to what does the ecological and cultural health of this place actually need?
So it's evolving our thinking from me to we?
Yes.
But wait, in that scenario, the tourist is essentially deprioritized, right?
Absolutely.
You're no longer the king making demands. You're being asked to act like a temporary resident who just blends in and supports the local resilience.
That's the main tension here. You aren't the center of the universe anymore.
I always think of it like the difference between a luxury hotel and being invited to a friend's dinner party.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, traditional tourism is the luxury hotel. You check in, you leave your wet towels on the floor, you order room service at 2 a.m., and someone else cleans up your mess. You paid for that privilege.
Right.
But regenerative tourism is being invited to a friend's dinner party. You aren't just there to eat. You're expected to help chop the vegetables, clear the plates, and, respect the house rules.
The dinner party is a brilliant way to picture it. But imagine if you show up to that dinner party and the host hands you a mop and gives you a pop quiz on local agriculture before you're allowed to sit down.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be intense.
That's the friction point the researchers highlight in the paper.
Right, because what happens to the person who just wants a relaxing holiday? I mean, what if they are burned out from a 50-hour work week and they just don't have the mental energy to chop vegetables on their vacation?
This brings us to a massive contradiction, and we really have to view it through the lens of DEI.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Exactly. Living systems thinking operates on the belief that everyone must make a self-directed contribution to the whole.
Okay.
But if a destination deprioritizes the tourist and demands this really high level of engagement, it inherently risks limiting participation.
How so?
Well, you end up only welcoming people who already fit the community's vibe. Scholars in the research point out that true inclusion is about creating an environment that fosters belonging and dismantles hierarchies.
Oh, I see. But if you're suddenly demanding that every single visitor must inherently improve the local ecosystem upon arrival,
Right.
you're basically building a giant hierarchy. You're saying only the perfect, enlightened guests get past the bouncer.
Spot on. And to see how this plays out off the whiteboard and in the real world, we can look at a massive, multi-million-dollar experiment.
Yes, New Zealand's post-COVID tourism strategy.
The New Zealand context is wild.
It really is. To set the scene for you, pre-COVID, the country was buckling under intense over-tourism. A 2019 Kantar survey showed over 25% of New Zealanders felt there were just way too many tourists.
That's a huge portion of the population.
Yeah, the sheer volume of people was straining the infrastructure and really frustrating locals.
Then the pandemic hit, borders slammed shut.
Overnight.
Suddenly, the New Zealand government had a blank slate, and they saw this rare opportunity to build back better.
Right.
They wanted to transition the entire country's approach and become the global leader in regenerative tourism.
Which is a very ambitious goal.
Very. And to do this, they invested $47 million for regional tourism organizations, the RTOs, to write what are called destination management plans.
Let's pause on that. $47 million just for the planning phase.
Just for the plans.
How do these destination management plans actually work? Are they just like marketing brochures?
No, they're much more powerful than that.
Fine.
A destination management plan, or DMP, is essentially the master blueprint for a region.
Okay.
It dictates when marketing dollars are spent, which types of infrastructure get built, how local communities are consulted, and crucially, who the region decides to target as a visitor.
Oh, wow. So it's the roadmap for a town's entire economic and cultural future.
Exactly.
Which means that massive investment birthed a very messy, very public debate over what actually constitutes the right kind of visitor.
Oh, definitely.
Former Minister of Tourism Stuart Nash was at the center of this.
Yeah.
And the initial definition of the high-value tourist was purely economic.
Right. It was all about the money.
Yeah, the ideal tourist was literally described as someone who flies business class, hires a private helicopter to fly around the Franz Josef Glacier, and eats at top-end restaurants.
Well, at the exact same time, the political rhetoric was heavily criticizing budget travelers.
Yes.
Nash made a very controversial comment that conflated low-value tourists with backpackers who, and this is a direct quote from the political discourse at the time, pull over to the side of the road and shit in our waterways.
Yikes. I mean, we should probably provide some impartial context on why a government minister would say something so extreme on the record.
Fair enough. It didn't come out of nowhere. That specific sentiment was fueled by years of ongoing local disputes over freedom camping in New Zealand.
Freedom camping, right.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, that's where travelers sleep in vans or tents on public land rather than paying for dedicated campsites.
Exactly. And because of the massive volume of these campers pre-COVID and, frankly, a lack of proper facilities in some areas, it created genuine environmental issues.
And a lot of local resentment.
A ton of local resentment.
Okay, so I get the frustration with bad behavior. But I have to push back on this whole helicopter ideal.
Go for it.
Isn't targeting a traveler just because they hire a private helicopter and fly business class just traditional aggressive capitalism wearing a green name tag?
That's exactly what it is.
I mean, we know that wealthy tourists often have astronomically high carbon footprints. A backpacker hitchhiking and eating cheap noodles is objectively putting less carbon into the atmosphere than a guy taking a private chopper over a glacier.
You're hitting on the exact hypocrisy that forced the government to pivot. Researchers were quick to point out that contradiction.
I bet.
Sending a global message that budget backpackers weren't welcome risked making New Zealand look incredibly elitist, all while failing basic environmental math.
Right.
So the government evolved its definition. The target shifted from high net worth to high values.
High values, okay. Meaning what exactly?
Well, the new rhetoric described this ideal tourist as someone who travels across different seasons to avoid overcrowding, voluntarily offsets their carbon emissions, deeply respects local cultures, and, takes the time to learn about the history of the region.
I mean, that sounds lovely on paper. That is the perfect dinner party guest we were talking about earlier.
It does sound lovely. But when you dig into the actual text of those destination management plans that the regional boards wrote, this new definition creates a completely different kind of trap.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. We enter what the researchers call the exclusion paradox.
The exclusion paradox. So, If destinations stop judging you by your wallet and start judging you by your morals, who gets left behind?
Exactly.
Because the RTOs took this high values directive and heavily segmented their marketing. The plans for regions like Waitaki and Hauraki Coromandel explicitly stated they only wanted values-based visitors who already value what the locals value.
And the problem with defining an in-group is that you automatically construct an out-group. In their desperation to find the ideal tourist, these regions actively engineered the concept of the low-value tourist.
Which is wild.
For example, the destination plan for Taranaki actually blamed the presence of lower-value tourists on the fact that the region offered too many free tourism products.
Wait, they actually put that in writing?
They did.
So if a hike is free, it naturally attracts the wrong kind of people. That is a wild assumption.
It's very revealing.
But the most striking example of this comes from the Bay of Plenty's Tourism with Purpose plan. They put this right in the document.
Oh, this one is fascinating.
Yeah, they question if the right visitors are the ones who rarely step out of their hotel rooms except to visit Starbucks or another international chain.
Wow.
And they aggressively contrast that Starbucks drinker with a tourist who eats authentic food from nearby farmers.
Notice how profound a value judgment that is, though.
Yeah.
It's no longer about whether you litter or respect the environment. It is a direct judgment on your lifestyle, your ethical consumption habits, and your cultural preferences.
Right. If you're listening to this and thinking, wait, am I a low-value tourist because I like a cheap hostel or because I bought a coffee at a chain? That's exactly the panic these policies accidentally created.
Completely.
By mocking the Starbucks tourist, aren't these boards just being massively elitist?
Yes. They're alienating people based on factors they might not even understand.
Exactly. Let's unpack the Starbucks tourist for a second.
Sure.
What if that person is a single parent traveling with 2 screaming toddlers? The cognitive load of navigating a new city is completely overwhelming, and they just want one familiar cup of coffee and 5 minutes of air conditioning.
That's a very real scenario.
Or what if they come from a cultural background where engaging with local farm-to-table dining is incredibly intimidating or even just financially out of reach? We're taking people experiencing travel fatigue and grading them on a moral scorecard.
And that is the crux of the exclusion paradox.
Yeah.
Regenerative tourism demands a collective mindset shift based on living systems thinking where everything is connected and everyone contributes.
Right.
But these destination plans treat having the right values as a fixed pre-existing trait. They view tourists as already converted saints who just drop from the sky.
Oh, I see. You either arrive fully enlightened about the local ecosystem or you're a burden.
Exactly. And that violates the most fundamental concept of inclusion in DEI.
How so?
Inclusion isn't about inviting people who are already exactly like you. It's about dismantling hierarchies.
Right.
These regenerative plans risk creating a new, rigid moral hierarchy where the traveler who can afford the mental bandwidth and cost of local organic food is deemed fundamentally superior to the person seeking familiar comforts.
It completely assumes people are incapable of growth. It assumes that if I walk into a Starbucks today, I am permanently disqualified from ever caring about a local farmer tomorrow.
Which completely hollows out the premise of regeneration. If you only invite people to your region who already agree with your environmental and cultural values, you aren't regenerating anything.
You're just segregating.
Yes, you're creating an eco-echo chamber.
Okay, I'm stuck here. If we can't let everyone do whatever they want and trash the place because volume tourism clearly failed New Zealand, but we also can't just gatekeep the perfect eco-tourist without becoming an elitist country club.
Right.
How on earth does a destination actually solve this?
Well, we have to look at tourism not as a filter, but as a learning system.
A learning system, okay.
Yeah. During a UN debate in 2020 on the future of post-COVID tourism, a speaker named Anshona delivered a really profound insight.
What did he say?
He argued, when people are excluded, they destroy. When they are included, they protect.
When they are included, they protect. Wow, that makes total psychological sense.
It really does.
If you feel like an unwelcome outsider in a town, you have zero stake in whether that town thrives.
Exactly. The researchers also bring in the work of a scholar named Sanford, who writes about capacity evolution.
Capacity evolution.
Yes, it basically means that in any living system, true health requires everyone to contribute, but you have to meet people where they are.
Oh, I love that.
You have to look at a person's potential to grow rather than comparing them to some static, mythical, ideal tourist.
Because that generic ideal doesn't even exist. Every person brings a different background to the table.
Yeah.
So regenerative tourism has to be an ongoing process of education, not a border patrol sorting the good from the bad.
Yes, beautifully put. And to be fair to New Zealand, the researchers did find a few rare positive examples from the destination management plans that grasped this concept.
Oh, good. Like what?
The destination plan for Nelson, for instance, focuses on educating visitors to become guardians of the region. They propose practical tools like an ambassador pack.
An ambassador pack. How does that work?
Well, instead of a generic tourist brochure, imagine being handed a toolkit upon arrival. It might include reusable items, primers on local cultural etiquette, and guides on how to interact with local ecosystems.
That's brilliant.
It actively teaches people how to participate rather than assuming they already know.
And Wanganui's plan specifically aspired to welcome visitors from all walks of life. They explicitly recognized that you actually need diversity, budget travelers, luxury travelers, people from different cultures to achieve genuine rejuvenation.
Right. It completely shifts the burden. Instead of demanding the tourist arrives perfect, it asks the destination, how are we designing our town to foster the conditions that help everyone develop a regenerative role?
I love the theory, but I have to throw a practical challenge at you.
Bring it on.
Can a destination realistically take a completely checked out, indifferent traveler, someone who just wants to sit by the pool, drink a margarita, and read a thriller, and teach them to care about the local ecosystem during a 5-day vacation? Isn't that expecting way too much of a local tourism board?
It is if you expect miracles. And this raises an important question about the timeline of transformation.
Okay.
The literature acknowledges that transformation cannot be rushed for quick impact. It's not about forcing an overnight epiphany on the guy sitting by the pool.
Right, you can't just ambush him with a pamphlet on soil health and expect him to become a climate activist.
No, you can't. It is about providing the opportunity and the structural support for diverse pathways of participation.
Pathways, got it.
Maybe that person by the pool never leaves the resort, but the resort itself is designed to subtly educate them.
Like how?
Well, maybe the menu highlights the story of a local fisherman, or the room key explains the building's water conservation. They learn one small thing. That is a step toward their potential.
Oh, I see.
But if you don't welcome the uninitiated, if you filter them out because they aren't high value enough, you completely lose the chance to teach them anything at all.
You slam the door on that cross-cultural exchange.
Yeah.
You lose the chance to spark even a tiny bit of curiosity.
And you fail the very test of interconnectedness that the entire concept of regenerative tourism is built upon.
Wow. So bringing this all together, we've learned that regenerative tourism is an incredibly beautiful concept. The idea of healing places through travel is something we desperately need. But when put into practice, if a destination relies on filtering out low-value visitors, whether they are budget backpackers or exhausted parents who just want a familiar Starbucks coffee, it becomes an exclusive club that defeats its own purpose.
And we owe it to you to provide a sobering reality check on how the New Zealand case study actually played out.
Oh, right. What happened?
Despite all the high-minded rhetoric, the $47 million spent on these plans, and the goal to be the global leader in regeneration, the actual implementation has hit a massive wall.
The political winds shifted, right?
Drastically.
Yeah.
The broader post-COVID political economy intervened. The current New Zealand government has shifted focus entirely.
Really?
Yeah, they recently cut $60 million from tourism innovation programs.
60 million.
Yes, their new publicly stated imperative is to turbocharge traditional economic growth through tourism.
Wow. So after all that debate about the perfect high-values guest, they're pivoting right back to the volume model to juice the economy.
Exactly. It highlights how incredibly difficult it is to sustain a long-term paradigm shift against the immediate crushing pressures of a political economy.
Yeah.
A true regenerative shift requires decades of commitment. It can't just be an opportunistic post-pandemic rebranding exercise.
No, it can't. It's a lot easier to write a shiny management plan about living systems than it is to fundamentally rewire how an entire nation makes its money.
Definitely. But even if the political momentum stalled, These destination management plans remain vital artifacts.
They do.
They expose the assumptions destinations make about us. They show us the razor-thin line between inviting people into a movement and locking the door behind the people who are already inside.
Which brings us right back to that vacation you're planning.
Right.
The tension between just consuming a place and leaving it better than you found it is very real. So the next time you travel, think about the kind of visitor you are. Are you stressing out, trying to perform as the ideal, high-value eco-tourist just to impress the locals and prove you belong?
Or are you simply showing up with an open mind, willing to let the destination teach you how to belong to it, even just for a few days?
Because true regeneration doesn't demand you be perfect when you step off the plane. It just asks that you be willing to grow while you're there.
Absolutely.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. We'll catch you next time.